Hi folks, this is my video log for the 6th of February 2015. It's a Friday and went to work today. This is obviously being recorded on the Saturday. Went to work on Friday and to give a walk and to say that I needed to up my dose on paracetamols is an understatement, but I had to go to work because I needed the money, and so I took a small group of students around Lantwick Major, and then in the evening I taught my class, which looked at Alexander the Great. So by the evening I was completely messed up. But I still managed to give the class, and obviously again needed the money for the evening as well. So it was good that I had some sleep in the afternoon, which helped. And the other bit of news from today as well is that I found out that Emma's put on the her SoundCloud podcast about mental illness, a piece which I've taken part in. So I'm going to put that link on my Facebook, and I'll obviously put that link on this video log as well. But today's video log particularly looks at Alexander the Great and a load of different videos. So feeling a slight bit better on Saturday, and so here is Alexander the Great and the archaeology classes that I've been teaching this week. Narration for Alexander the Great and the associated archaeology. I decided, as a look at Alexander the Great, to simply focus on some of the myths and legends associated with him. I could go into the various battles and conflicts around Alexander the Great, but that's something you can come up with in a Hollywood film. So the first chap that we've got is Alexander the Great, who was born approximately on the 20th of July in the year 356 and died at the age of only 33 in the year 323 BC. So he's born in Macedonia, and a few of the early things that you can tell from this chart is that there's a famous figure thrown in here, Aristotle. He was educated by Aristotle in the year 343 BC, and that's 13 years into Alexander the Great's life. Then in the year 342, Alexander the Great wins Bucephalus, a horse that his own dad, Philip II, is unable to mount. And Alexander is said to have learnt that Bucephalus was frightened of his own shadow. So Alexander the Great befriended the horse, and Bucephalus is apparently 30 years old when he dies. And Alexander the Great keeps Bucephalus with him through his campaigning and expeditions throughout the Persian world and all the way through to the gates of India itself. So in a way, Alexander the Great can be seen to have a friend with him that follows him through his great moments of great empire building, and that's his horse. So then we go on to the other quick date here, the assassination of Philip II, Alexander the Great's father. Alexander's only 20 years old in the year 336, and this then throws Alexander the Great into a period of conquest. Within the next 13 years, Alexander the Great conquers approximately 100 million people, and the best part of half of the known world, i.e. the known world to the Greeks and the Egyptians. So that's a notable achievement, something that nobody else has achieved. The Romans took when they were conquering the Mediterranean, hundreds and hundreds of years to conquer a similar area. Alexander the Great did it in 13 years. In the year 331, Alexander the Great is confirmed. His divinity is confirmed by the Egyptians as being a god. He's actually the son of Zeus, according to the original legend that Olympias, his mother, actually put abound. And Egypt welcomes Alexander and his army. Moving on, by 327, Alexander the Great is on the gates of India, and he heads back to Babylon, and he wants to make Babylon the centre of his new empire. He's got a campaign prepared for the Arabian Peninsula and so on, and other parts of the world. But by the age of 33, in the year 323, he dies. Some say poisoning, some say natural causes, some say a broken heart because his best friend and lover, apparently, Hephaestion, dies a year earlier. I would say that Alexander the Great died of a completely exhausted brain to achieve so much in such a short period of time. I think that probably caused his death. Moving on. This is the map of Alexander the Great's world. In short, all the way from the River Ganges, the Indus Valley, modern day India today, up to Afghanistan and the Hindu Kush, up to the Caspian Sea, conquering up to the Black Sea, most of the known Greek world at that period, and all of the habitable area of Egypt, and great area of the Levant, the Persian world, and even the likes of Cyprus. We show the room in Pompeii of a reconstruction, albeit a smaller reconstruction, of the great mosaic that was constructed 100 years BC. It was found intact, semi-intact in Pompeii, bits of damage to it. And this shows the story of Alexander the Great defeating, at the Battle of Issus, Darius III's army. This is a replica. The original is in the Naples Museum. This is the original in the Naples Museum, 5.2 meters in length, which it would have been on the floor, and 2.72 meters in width. Center area showing Darius on chariot, Alexander over on the left, which we'll show you on another image now. Obviously lost a bit of its colour, but they lifted it because it was obviously relating to such a great person like Alexander and Darius III. This shows the detail, obviously the colour now, and the chainmail itself isn't the normal type of chainmail. It's these little bits of metal sewn into a tunic, and this is one of Darius's soldiers. This is Darius appealing for his men for unity and to retreat from the field of battle. And the point is that all Alexander the Great wants in this battle is to face Darius and to defeat him, which would have saved many thousands of lives and further campaigns and battles. And Alexander the Great was seen to be one of those great levelers in history, in that the people he conquered, he was very forgiving, and he was not one that would enslave thousands of people as well, that the Romans would eventually do. But the Romans would also learn from something else from Alexander the Great, that if you can get into a country with limited deaths and limited conquest, and you can pacify the people, you don't need to enslave them, and you can basically rule over a people's and each of you are accompanying with the fact that each of you use each other. So where the Romans felt that slavery was required, fair enough, but the other thing they learned from Alexander the Great, in the case of Britain, most of the people in Britain were completely pacified very, very quickly, and therefore we became part of the Roman world. That's something that the Romans learnt from Alexander the Great's conquests of this land. There's Alexander the Great on his horse, with Medusa on his breastplate. This is more of a stylized reconstruction of the mosaic, but again, giving you an idea of Alexander the Great on the left and Darius on his chariot. The interesting point is that Alexander is the centerpiece of this great mosaic, and it's giving you a story though, and that's the main thing. And that's a reconstructed mosaic of the mosaic. Obviously not as good as the original, because on the original it's using very tiny pieces. On this one, much larger pieces, much less detail. Horse and its snaffle bit on the battlefield. Of course, all these little bits of detail, very fine detail. Many times Alexander the Great's bust would be copied and replicated, and this is one such. For the next 1,000 or so years, people are going to be replicating the image of Alexander the Great, which is true greatness and true deity in its greatest form. Not even the god Zeus lasted in memory as long as Alexander the Great. And I think that tells you of Alexander the Great's greatness. An image. Is this Alexander the Great's tomb? No, it isn't. Alexander wished to be buried amongst his people, under the ground. Many places in the world say to have kept Alexander the Great's body. But it's probably true that Alexander the Great was laid to rest in Alexandria. He was not laid above the ground. This is more akin to the reconstruction of the Temple of Halicarnassus, not of the tomb at Halicarnassus. This is not akin to what Alexander the Great's tomb would have looked like. This is one of a number of sarcophagi. This is at Sidon in Syria, linking us in with Antipater of Sidon, who wrote about the 7 ancient wonders of the ancient world in the year 125 BC. This is one, as I said, of a number of sarcophagi that are said to have held at one time Alexander the Great's body. This is an example in Italy, and this is more akin to how Alexander the Great's body would have been left in state under the ground, met by some steps, and a burial in Alexandria. This is of an Egyptian noble, but we would assume that Alexander the Great's tomb would have been similar, a little bit more greater. The Egyptians did really respect Alexander the Great, a cartouche to Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is said to have bestowed great divinity just before Olympias slept with Philip II. On the eve of Olympias' wedding night, she was said to have been visited by Zeus, who impregnated her. And on the night of the marriage, Philip would obviously ask why his new wife was seemingly already pregnant, and she said that she had been impregnated by Zeus. Hence leading to the legend of the creation of Alexander the Great. Zeus being his father, and given to the fact that Alexander the Great, when he is born, is to be seen as a god. Artemis from a temple in Ephesus is said to have visited Alexander the Great on the day of Alexander the Great's birth, because she was there, because she's the goddess of love, goddess of hunting, there to protect and look over the great Alexander, the Great of all history. More to the fact rather than the legend. Cartouche itself, in Egypt, from the year 331 BC, reading in reverse. The Egyptians saw him as a true god. This is more akin to the steps leading into a chamber which had led into the tomb of Alexander the Great. This is of a Roman version in the burial ground of Alexandria. A number of places around the world have got the name Alexandria. At least 20 cities founded by Alexander the Great were given the name Alexandretta, Alexandria, and so on. Alexander the Great created another 50 cities, all with different names, and one named after his own hall on the gates of India. So, you know, he's out there naming the landscape and being the great. This is the chamber at Amphipolis in Thessalonica, Greece. It hasn't been fully excavated, but back in November 14th last year, 2014, they revealed the site of a burial ground and a tomb, this great tomb, 8 meters tall inside, that may relate to Alexander the Great. Some say it was the burial place of Alexander the Great, but he couldn't have been buried everywhere. Alexander the Great's body was hijacked by Ptolemy, one of Alexander the Great's generals, soon after Alexander the Great had died, and his body had been probably preserved in honey, it's said. And it was kept in Alexandria because Ptolemy felt that the body itself gave him some power, gave him the ability to be the next in line from the great Alexander the Great. Ptolemy creating the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt. Going over to the Library of Alexandria, a library dedicated to Alexander the Great. At its height in the 200 years BC, apparently had 500,000 scrolls. You may have had 2 or 3 scrolls to every learned work, but so many writings in the library, some in papyrus, some on other forms of similar types of papery materials, cuneiform tablets, stone tablets, wax tablets, all types of work there. They said that there would be a fair that on Rhodes and other Greek islands that people would collect works and bring them back to the library. A bit like the British Library today, if you publish a book, you have to give them a copy of your book. It's very similar to what happened with the Library of Alexandria. There's a stone dedicated to Trajan when he visited the Library of Alexandria, gave a donation for its upkeep in approximately about 115 AD, 400 years after it had been constructed and used. The image inside the library. Alexander the Great is said to have had many temples erected in his name after his death. He was a true god. One interesting thing is this is Lysimachus, a general that fought for Philip II, Alexander the Great's dad, and also fought for Alexander the Great himself. After the death of Alexander the Great, Lysimachus issued coins with the head of Alexander the Great. That's very unusual to do that with any figure in history. In other words, the memory and loyalty of his generals was kept after the death of Alexander the Great. In doing so, coins still held the head of Alexander the Great. And those individuals who were in the stead of Alexander the Great after his death, their memory would be lost when the memory of Alexander the Great would continue. It'd be similar today if Charles III, after he takes over from his mum, Elizabeth, he continues to use her head on his coinage, given to the true greatness of the Queen. What's being said for this is the same for Alexander the Great. This is a coin of Alexander the Great himself. These coins are absolutely so beautiful, it's very difficult to describe. Thank you for listening, watching these images today. Any questions, get back to me. Thank you. Thanks for listening to me and look in the images about Alexander the Great. Hopefully that's been of some help, and speak to you all soon. Thanks. Bye.